Lena Whitaker wasn't running away. She was leaning in into the silence, into the wild. At 27, she had already photographed jaguars in Belize, slept under the aurora in Alaska, and scaled peaks that made most people dizzy just looking at the photos. But this trip was different. No client, no schedule, no pressure. Just her camera, and the ancient breath of Yellowstone's backcountry. She told her sister it was a reset, a solo retreat for clarity, whatever that meant. She was chasing something, maybe peace, maybe purpose, but she wasn't saying it out loud. On June 12, 2022, Lena parked her Subaru at the south entrance and signed her name into the backcountry logbook. In looping cursive, she wrote her destination, Thoroughfare region. A 14-day loop, solo. She left early the next morning, gear packed tight, DSLR wrapped in fleece. Rangers nodded politely. Another experienced hiker chasing wild solitude. Nothing unusual. That trail, leading into the thoroughfare, was infamous. It's called the most remote spot in the continental United States for a reason over 30 miles from the nearest road, a place where silence hums like static and grizzlies outnumber people. But Lena had done harder things. She texted a friend a photo from the trailhead, sun slicing through tall lodge poles, her silhouette small in the foreground. It was captioned, "See you on the other side." No one ever did. Days passed, then weeks. No one panicked at first. Lena was known for going off-grid. Sometimes she'd vanish for 10 days and come back glowing, camera full, smiling like she'd been somewhere sacred. But this time, the silence stretched. The camera roll never updated. The check-in never came. By late June, her family started calling. Forest Service checked the logs. Her name was still there but not signed out. The Subaru, dusty and sun-faded, still sat at the trailhead, keys under the mat. Her 2-week trek was now past 4. One ranger put it simply, she signed into the backcountry registry, and then she vanished. What began as a peaceful solo journey was about to become one of the most haunting disappearances in Yellowstone history. The first thing they noticed was the dust. Coated thick across the windshield, clinging to every surface of the blue Subaru, like time had stopped. Ranger Travis Yates found it on July 5 parked neatly at the thoroughfare trailhead, untouched for weeks. Inside were receipts from a Jackson Hole grocery run, trail mix wrappers, a half-read paperback, and a folded map marked with pink highlighter. Lena's name was still in the trail registry. She had entered the wilderness, but she hadn't come back. No one sounded an alarm right away. Solo hikers like Lena often went radio silent. The thoroughfare is unforgiving miles of wet marsh, bare country, unmaintained trails that vanish in overgrowth. Cell reception dies within an hour. Emergency beacons fail. Most who venture in are seasoned. Rangers chalked it up to a delay, but as the second week passed, that theory collapsed. July 10th, a search team was quietly assembled. Helicopters scanned the tree line. Rangers rode horseback into the basin. They found boot prints in soft earth at Fox Creek. Past likely hers. A crumpled granola bar wrapper that matched the brand found in her car. But that's where the trail stopped. No campfire rings, no broken branches, no scent trail for dogs. It was like she stepped off the map. Lena had brought a GPS tracker, but it hadn't pinged since her second day out. The last signal, weak and fragmented, showed her near Open Creek, headed deeper into isolation. Some believed she was injured, others suspected she got turned around in a storm. But one searcher, an old volunteer named Hank Bell, said something that gave everyone pause. This place doesn't lose people, it keeps them. The terrain grew more treacherous with every mile. Search parties pulled back as weather worsened. Rain swallowed tracks. Bears moved through campgrounds. What should have been a search and rescue became a waiting game. Days slipped into weeks. Weeks into silence. By August, Lena Whitaker's name was added to the federal missing persons list. She wasn't the first to vanish in Yellowstone, but soon she would be the most mysterious. Because the wilderness hadn't just taken her, it had hidden her too well. They found it on the 12th day of searching a small clearing off a poorly marked spur near Open Creek. The soil was soft with moss, pine needles undisturbed. A fire ring of blackened stone sat cold in the center, ashes long faded. Lena's tent was still staked into the earth, the flap partially open, as if she had stepped away for a moment and never returned. Her sleeping bag was zipped halfway, a pair of boots neatly placed at the edge of the nylon floor. Her backpack leaned against a fallen log. Nothing was scattered, nothing overturned. It looked like she'd just paused, like she'd been called away mid-thought. But there were details that didn't sit right. Her journal, a leather-bound notebook she'd used religiously, was missing. So was her satellite phone. Both had been on her permit's gear list. Rangers scoured the area but found no signs of struggle, no blood, no drag marks, no bear prints, just silence, and something else. 10 paces from the tent, carved chest-high into a lodgepole pine, was a symbol, simple but wrong. A circle with 3 vertical lines slashed through its center like claw marks. Fresh, clean, deliberate, no initials, no dates, just the mark, carved deep into the bark. Botanists confirmed the cut was recent, less than 3 weeks old. The search crew flagged it, photographed it, moved on. But one of them, Ranger Yates, kept glancing back. It wasn't vandalism, he said later. It felt placed, like it was watching us. That night, a sudden wind howled through the basin, snapping branches and sending echoes through the trees. Some said it was just the weather. Others weren't so sure. Lena's name echoed through the search radios, but the forest gave nothing back. Just stillness. Just the symbol. From the air, the clearing looked like any other patch of woodsun, remarkable. But on the ground, the air was dense, thick, off. Searchers marked the site and moved the perimeter outward. But no further sign of Lena was found. No trail, no prints. Just the tent, the boots, and that carved warning one the forest never meant to explain. The deeper Lena had walked, the stranger the silence had become. Locals called it the Back of Beyond. Rangers called it the Thoroughfare Basin. But to legal scholars and internet theorists, it had another name: the Zone of Death. A 50-square-mile stretch of Yellowstone so remote, so bureaucratically forgotten that it fell into a chilling loophole where a person could, technically, commit a crime and face no jury. No legal jurisdiction, no courtroom. The Constitution demands a jury be drawn from both the district and state in which the crime occurred. But the Idaho section of Yellowstone where Lena was believed to have vanished has no residents. No one to serve, no one to convict. A legal blind spot in the middle of America's oldest national park. Conspiracy theorists had been whispering about it for years. Podcasts debated its implications. Reddit threads mapped disappearances nearby with red X's and pinned headlines. But most people dismissed it as internet myth, until Lena walked in and never walked out. Some say she must have gotten lost, injured, taken by an animal. But others point to a darker possibility, that something knows about the loophole, something that uses the dead zone as a veil, as cover. Over the years, a handful of people had disappeared there. Most were found eventually, but a few weren't. No remains, no clues, just names on a growing list and families left behind. One theory claimed the forest wasn't just indifferent, it was active. That strange carvings, erratic compass readings, and sudden fog banks were signs that something was watching, waiting, and Lena, she'd gone deeper than most. Her last GPS ping had placed her just 3 miles inside the Idaho border, right in the heart of the zone. That's where her trail stopped. That's where the symbol was carved. Theories blossomed like wildfire. Secret experiments, rogue cults, government black sites, or worse, something ancient buried beneath the park, older than the trees. The media didn't bite. But those who searched the zone firsthand told a different story. Something wasn't right out there. Something quiet, patient. Lena had vanished into a loophole in the law, and maybe something else. In the towns that border Yellowstone, stories move differently, passed in whispers across bar counters and around campfires, told between sips of whiskey and nervous glances toward the dark tree line. Search and rescue pulled back their efforts by early August, but in the weeks that followed, locals started coming forward, not with answers, but with something stranger. A hunter named Dale Probst claimed he saw someone walking along a ridge near Heart Lake in mid-July, far off trail, barefoot, arms out like she was balancing on a tightrope. "Wasn't right," he muttered. "She wasn't walking, she was floatin'." A wildlife photographer reported flickers of light blue and unnatural rising from the timberline just before dawn. Not lightning, not headlamps, it pulsed, like it breathed. Others spoke of odd sounds, voices where there should have been none, laughter carried on windless nights, animal calls that ended in words. Most brushed it off as fear, fatigue, or too much local lore. But one story stuck. Amos Green, a retired trapper who lived off-grid south of the Beckler River, hiked into town with something to say. He'd seen Lena, or someone who looked like her. "A girl with a braid and a green coat," he said, "walkin' with two people, but they weren't people." When pressed, he grew quiet. Tall, pale, barefoot. They moved like ghosts, didn't leave tracks, and she followed him like she was sleepwalking. He reported it to the rangers. They took notes but didn't follow up. Amos didn't press. He just packed up his things and moved his cabin closer to the main road after 30 years in the wilderness. "Whatever's out there," he said, "it don't want to be found, and it don't let go easy." The park grew quieter after that. Fewer hikers, fewer campers. The thoroughfare remained closed due to trail damage, but locals knew better. They said something was waking up out there, and Lena Whitaker had walked straight into it. Back in Boulder, Colorado, the Whitakers weren't sleeping. Lena's disappearance fractured their world like glass under pressure, quiet at first, then suddenly everywhere. Her father, Greg, tried to stay logical. Her mother, June, collapsed inward, answering every unknown number in case it was her. But it was her sister, Madeline, who tore through Lena's digital life. Emails, cloud backups, password journals. That's when she found the messages Lena hadn't shared, drafts never sent. "I dream of a clearing," one read. "The trees bow inward. There's something waiting in the center." Others hinted at compulsion, not curiosity. "I know how this sounds, but I have to go. I think it's calling me." At first the family thought it was metaphorical, poetic rambling from someone exhausted, but there was consistency. Over and over, Lena mentioned the source. She said she was going to find the source, Madeline told reporters later. "We thought she meant a waterfall." The family held press conferences, set up a website, posted updates. They weren't looking for attention, they were begging for it. The National Park Service had gone quiet. The case wasn't closed, but resources had dried up. There were other hikers, other priorities. "We just want the search resumed," Greg said in a Denver News interview. "We want her brought home." June couldn't bring herself to speak on camera. She just kept replaying Lena's last voicemail on speaker at night. A soft, "Hey, just got to the park," followed by a pause like she was about to say more. Then silence. They hired private trackers. Flew drones, shared maps marked with every breadcrumb the rangers had found. But nothing new surfaced. No new prints, no gear, no Lena. Just dreams, just symbols. Just that awful feeling in the gut like she hadn't just gotten lost. Like something had taken her. And Madeline couldn't shake the idea that her sister hadn't been pulled into the wilderness. She'd gone willingly, following something none of them understood. By late October, Yellowstone shifted into its long white sleep. Storms rolled in from the northwest, blanketing the high passes in 6-foot drifts. Trails vanished, rivers slowed, the forest froze. And with it, so did the case. Lena Whitaker's name remained etched on the incident board at the Ranger, stashed alongside a faded photo of her smiling on a rocky summit. But the updates stopped. The calls slowed. The press moved on. What had begun as a full-scale search had become a quiet footnote in the park's winter log. The thoroughfare trail was officially closed due to seasonal inaccessibility. Unofficially, it was haunted. With boots grounded and the backcountry buried, the public filled the vacuum with imagination. Online forums ignited with theories. Some blamed wildlife, a grizzly ambush, a rogue cougar, maybe even wolves. "She must have gone off trail, startled something," one user wrote. "This is why you don't solo hike out there." Others weren't so sure. One post, widely shared before being deleted, claimed Lena's GPS data had been scrubbed intentionally. The poster insisted. Conspiracy channels took it further. Secret rituals, government silencing, portals, Bigfoot. "She found something," they whispered. And they buried it. The symbol carved into the tree didn't help. Someone leaked a photo of it to Reddit. Within hours it was being compared to Norse runes, native glyphs, even alchemical signs. No expert could place it definitively. That only made it worse. Meanwhile, the Whitaker family hung between two unbearable truths. She was gone, or she wasn't. Greg still believed in logic. "If she's out there, we'll find her," he said in a December interview. But June stopped setting a place for her at Christmas. She just stared at the empty seat. Madeline the fighter grew quiet. "Every day without her," she posted, "feels like a second death. Snow fell for months. The forest hid its secrets under a perfect white sheet. Hikers didn't return in spring like they used to. Tour guides skipped the thoroughfare entirely. It was as if the land had swallowed Lena and wasn't ready to let go." April 3, 2024. Just past noon, a University of Montana research drone skimmed low over the southern edge of Yellowstone, scanning elk migration routes as the snow began to retreat. The footage was routine until one frame shimmered. A glint, something metallic catching sunlight just for a second. Coordinates were logged. Investigators dispatched. They expected debris, maybe a hunter's trash, or lost gear washed down by the melt. Instead, they found the clearing. Half a mile off the main trail, barely visible beneath thawing branches and ice-scoured earth, the drone team arrived at the base of a rock shelf where the reflection had come from. At first, it looked like an old campsite. But this wasn't random. A ring of stones formed a nearly perfect circle. Inside it, burned wood, scraps of cloth, something that looked like bone. And near the center, reflecting sunlight from a crack in the clouds, was a camera lens. Scratched, frostbitten, but intact. Rangers moved in. The area was cordoned off. A forensic team airlifted in. Underneath the snow, the scene came to life. A set of hiking poles collapsed neatly. A backpack buried halfway under a drift, still zipped shut. And beside it, nestled between two branches like an offering, was Lena's green thermal jacket, folded, clean, placed, not dropped, not blown, placed. That's when they knew. This wasn't a survival scene, this was deliberate, purposeful. The lens belonged to a DSLR, Lena's make and model. The body was missing, but the memory card slot was intact. One ranger said it felt like the woods had been waiting to be found. Another refused to go back after dusk. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a break in the case, it was something else. Something none of them were prepared for. They found her 3 days after the drone sighting, just as the last of the spring frost released its grip. A team of forensic anthropologists and park rangers followed a trail of disquieting clues: burned fabric, carved bark, odd stone arrangements, until it opened into a clearing no one had mapped. A natural amphitheater of trees, curved like watchful sentinels, their branches bare despite the seasonal bloom, and in the center, Lena Whitaker's remains, not scattered, not buried, arranged. Her bones were laid in a wide spiral, vertebrae outward, ribcage positioned like wings half-folded. Her skull faced upward, mouth slightly open, as if still caught in some final exhale. The arrangement was too precise, too clean, too untouched by the chaos of wildlife or time. Her clothing had been placed nearby, her jacket, boots, even her socks, all folded with eerie care. No signs of tearing, no blood, no drag marks. It was as if she had undressed herself before laying down to die. In the spiral's center sat her camera. the same one she'd carried across continents, now resting in silence. The body was gone, lens removed, but the shell remained, its plastic casing warped by cold, yet unmistakable. The spiral around it was roughly 15 feet in diameter, framed by small stones placed at near-perfect intervals. Someone had made this, not in a panic, not in haste, with intent. The air in the clearing felt wrong too, still, too quiet. Even birds seemed to avoid it. One ranger turned off his radio without realizing it. Another vomited behind a tree. "She didn't die here," one whispered. "She was brought here, but no tracks led in. No broken branches, no trail of entry. Just the spiral, the bones, and the feeling that something had finished whatever it had come to do." Word reached the Whitaker family the next morning. Greg dropped the phone. June collapsed in their hallway. Maitland didn't speak for 3 days. Lena had been found. But it wasn't peace they felt. It was dread. Because no one could explain how she'd ended up like that, so far off the trail, so untouched by nature, so orchestrated. And deep down they knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of something far stranger. The forensic team worked for 48 hours straight, photographing, measuring, analyzing every inch of the clearing, but the more they uncovered, the less sense it made. Lena's bones showed no signs of traumatic fractures, no punctures, no defensive wounds. Her femurs were intact, her spine still aligned. There was no indication of a fall, an attack, or even prolonged exposure. It was as if her body had simply stopped, and the spiral? It wasn't improvised. It followed a geometric precision that baffled the analysts. The radius increased evenly with each loop, mimicking ancient ceremonial pattern spirals found in megalithic sites, petroglyphs, places where time folds in on itself. Rangers widened their search around the perimeter and quickly found more of the symbols identical to the one carved near her abandoned tent. This time, there were 6. Etched into trees, their bark peeled away with care. Some symbols were barely a foot from the ground, others carved 6 feet high, always facing inward toward the clearing. But the most unsettling discovery was orientation. When charted, the symbols aligned perfectly with cardinal directions north, south, west-and. All remaining trees were angled slightly toward the east. Toward the rising sun, one forensic cartographer simply muttered, "This was a ritual." The camera was sent to a lab. Its memory card had been removed, and its lens placed precisely 20 feet away, balanced atop a moss-covered stone. The spiral center had once been a fire pit. Charcoal samples indicated a single, brief burn. No signs of fuel accelerant, no scent of flesh. Just ash, bone dust, and fragments of something metallic, possibly a pendant or a locket, melted beyond recognition. Analysts debated whether Lena had constructed the spiral herself. But the size, scale, and complexity made it nearly impossible for one person to create, especially without tools, especially in silence. Maitland flew to Wyoming to identify her sister's belongings. She stood at the edge of the clearing, trembling. "She was trying to tell us something," she whispered. "But I don't think it was just us she was talking to." Behind her, the trees creaked in a windless sky, and the spiral etched in dirt, in death, in silence waited. It was Ranger Yates who found it, half by instinct, half by dread. Just beyond the spiral, buried beneath a cairn of perfectly stacked stones that hadn't been there during initial sweeps, lay a rusted military ammo can, cold to the touch, sealed tight. The kind of thing hunters once used to store dry matches and spare rounds. Inside, wrapped in a soaked canvas pouch, was Lena's journal. The cover was soft leather, warped by moisture, frayed at the edges. Her name was etched faintly on the inside cover, along with a date, June 2022. Rangers took it to base camp, where forensic archivists began the delicate process of unfolding each page. The entries started normally detailed observations of elk migrations, lighting notes for photography, sketches of rock formations. But something shifted halfway through. The handwriting became looser. The words tangled. Then the entries changed. "I hear them when the sun is low," she wrote on page 47. It's not madness, they're teaching me. Later, there's something beneath the crust, older than stone. It hums at night if you sit still enough. And then, the trees aren't still, they listen, they bend when you're not watching. Her entries became rhythmic, almost poetic. Descriptions of waking visions, figures standing among steam vents, mouths unmoving, eyes like mirrors. A passage scrawled in the margin read, "The clearing was already here. I just had to remember it." One page was torn violently. Another was soaked through with what looked like charcoal-stained water. The last legible entry chilled even the most seasoned ranger. "The spiral is not for them. It's for it. It sees me now." The final page was blank, but faint indentations revealed pressure marks from a pen. A spiral, drawn over and over again, deep enough to press through 4 layers of paper. Experts called it obsession. Madeline called it a message. "She didn't lose her mind," she said. "She gave it away." The ammo can was closed, the cairn left untouched. No one could agree Wolf anyone put it there, and the more they read, the less they understood. But one thing was clear. Lena hadn't been afraid at the end. She'd been waiting. When news of the spiral and journal leaked to the public, Yellowstone's silence was broken. And into that silence came the voices, the fringe experts, the folklorists, the rangers long retired with more stories than scars, people who had seen things they were never allowed to report. "This isn't the first time," said Harold Eastman, a ranger from the 1970s. "You spend enough seasons out here, you learn the forest has moods, and sometimes it doesn't want you." He recounted a 1978 incident where a solo hiker vanished near Shoshone Lake. All that was found: a walking stick wrapped in deer sinew and a pile of white stones arranged in a crescent. The case was buried, literally. A park historian named Dr. Eliza Markham stepped forward with a theory that turned heads. She pointed to obscure maps from the 1940s, once classified by the U.S. Geological Survey. They referenced geothermal disturbances in a crescent-shaped formation near the very clearing where Lena was found. "But that's not all," she said. "There were disappearances. 6 hikers between 1943 and 1946, no bodies. Just item shoes arranged in circles, fire pits in perfect geometry." One memo, unearthed from National Archives, described a cult of buried circles observed during wartime training exercises. The men who found it were told to report nothing. "It's like the park has a memory," Eliza said, "and sometimes it repeats itself." Indigenous stories added another layer. Shoshone elders had long warned of the watchers beneath the stone, ancient spirits that stirred when people walked the old trails at the wrong times. Some tribes avoided certain areas entirely, calling them places where the earth breathes wrong. The geothermal rhythms of Yellowstone often romanticized took on a darker tone. Hot springs where compasses failed, steam vents that whispered, forest trails where time seemed to stretch. Spiritual guides described the thoroughfare as thin, a place where the veil between worlds was fragile. "Something found her," said one guide. "But maybe she found it first." The story wasn't just about Lena anymore. It was about Yellowstone itself, not as a park, not as a preserve, but as something older, something still watching, and something perhaps still waiting. They pieced it together slowly, page by page, bone by bone, image by image. The journal, the clearing, the scattered contents of her pack, and the camera, everything pointed to a transformation in Lena's final days. Not of direction, but of purpose. Investigators believe she stopped hiking around day 9. That's when her GPS trail ends. That's when the first spiral symbols appear in her notes, drawn in the margins beside half-finished sentences and cryptic phrases like, "It only listens at dawn," and "Spiral is entry, not escape." The photos recovered from her camera save to internal cache helped confirm it. Dozens of shots taken from the same vantage point. The clearing. First wide-angle frames of trees, then close-ups of bark with newly carved symbols. Then her own hand holding stones, laying them out in arcs, spirals, crescents. Some images were blurred by movement, others almost reverent in composition. The final image was different, taken at ground level, slightly tilted. The spiral complete. Lena's jacket folded beside it. And at the center a blank space where the camera had once rested. Forensics matched soil from the clearing to the bottom of her boots. She had never left once she arrived. The food found in her bag was untouched, the water tablets unopened. She didn't intend to leave. In one journal entry dated only Day 13, she wrote, "This place remembers. I think it knew me before I arrived." The tent found earlier, her first base camp, was 14 miles away. She had walked, alone, through one of the most punishing regions of the park, carrying only essentials and a single purpose: to build. Her sister Madeline reviewed the journal with the lead investigator and simply whispered, she was making a temple, whether to honor something or summon it no one knew. But every motion Lena made in those last days was careful, chosen. She wasn't panicked, she wasn't lost. She had found something, or believed she had. The final note, scratched into the back of a photo sleeve, read, "You won't find me. I'm not lost. I'm home." For the team reconstructing her final movements, one thing became clear. Lena Whitaker hadn't died in confusion or fear. She had crossed some invisible threshold and built a monument to whatever waited on the other side. The internet erupted. Once the journal's contents leaked, the spiral photos released, and the cairn discovery confirmed, Lena's story spread like wildfire, faster than the park could contain it. Subreddits formed overnight. YouTubers posted hour-long deep dives. Theories spiraled, just like the symbol she carved into the forest floor. One faction claimed she was recruited or summoned into a cult. They pointed to the buried circle references, the symbols, the geometric alignment, the precision of her bones. The spiral wasn't art, it was a ritual. She didn't build it alone, one post insisted. She was guided. Others suggested Lena was undergoing a transformation, spiritual, metaphysical, even cosmic. Her journal entries, they argued, weren't madness, they were clarity. A woman leaving behind the material world to enter something older, deeper, and more essential. A thinning of the veil. She ascended, wrote one thread titled, "The Spiral Path Isn't Death, It's Return." Critics pushed back. Psychologists weighed in. Solo wilderness journeys often trigger psychological breaks. Isolation, sleep deprivation, environmental stress, they could explain the voices, the visions, the obsessive patterns. Lena's journal, they argued, was the documented collapse of a brilliant mind under pressure. "We romanticize madness when it comes wrapped in mystery," one expert said. But others weren't convinced. There were just too many oddities. The untouched food, the surgical arrangement of bones, the symbols no linguist could place, and the undeniable fact that someone, Lena, or someone else had carved 6 matching glyphs into trees, all oriented toward the rising sun. Madeline refused to speak publicly, but one friend posted a quote she had written in a private message. "If it was madness, it was the most organized kind I've ever seen, and she was never chaotic. She always had a plan." The park declined to comment further. The clearing was declared a restricted zone. The journal was sealed. But speculation only grew. Was Lena led astray by ancient myths, or had she uncovered a truth the rest of us weren't meant to find? The spiral remained etched into moss and memory, a question mark in the soil. And Lena Whitaker, once a woman in search of silence, had become a signal broadcasting still from beneath the trees. Lena was laid to rest on a cloudless June morning in Boulder, Colorado. Her ashes were scattered at the base of Flatiron's trailhead, one of her favorite spots, where she had once captured a sunrise that still hangs framed in her parents' hallway. Only family attended. No press, no cameras, no eulogies from strangers who'd never met her but had written thousands of theories about her online. Just silence and grief. Greg placed her camera strap across the memorial stone. June brought a small spiral drawn on paper and tucked it beneath a pine cone. Madeline said nothing. Her eyes were red but dry. "She was never meant to be explained," she whispered. That same week, the National Park Service quietly fenced off the clearing in Yellowstone. Official documents labeled it a geothermal instability zone. But those who'd seen ice rangers, researchers, even skeptics knew better. The spiral had been disturbed by the thaw, but traces remained. Bone dust in the moss, the faint groove of carved symbols in bark that never fully healed. The cairn where Lena's journal had been found, gone, collapsed, or perhaps removed. But just when the story seemed closed, hikers began reporting strange things. A couple from Oregon saw lights hovering above Beckler Meadows pulsing in a rhythmic pattern, like breath. A solo backpacker found a cairn stacked with 6 stones, each etched with the same spiral pattern. In Lamar Valley, a seasoned guide said he heard a woman humming from deep in the trees, though no one else was around. One of the most unsettling reports came from a hiker who veered off trail near Open Creek and claimed to find a small stone with writing scratched into its face, faint but legible. It read, "I wasn't lost, I was found, now so are you." The stone vanished before it could be retrieved. Wind, maybe, or something else. Park officials dismissed the stories as pareidolia, trail hallucinations, and the ripple effects of internet hysteria. But locals knew better. Something had stirred when Lena walked into those woods, and something had noticed. This story was intense. But this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.